The alien warship drifted through the black sea of stars, silent except for the hum of its great engines. Among the crew of scaled warriors, insect pilots, and tall gray tacticians, there was one figure who did not belong. He was human, short compared to the others, soft-skinned and quiet. He spent most of his time in the corner of the mess hall, eating alone or staring out the window into the endless dark. The crew whispered about him. "Why is he here?" One insect pilot asked, her wings twitching. "He never speaks," hissed a scaled warrior, his claws tapping against the table. "He looks weak, too fragile. Not fit for war," another muttered, shaking his head. The captain heard their whispers but said nothing. He had allowed the human aboard only because of an alliance treaty with Earth. The treaty said that one human soldier must serve among them, to learn and to fight if needed. But so far this human had done nothing. He followed orders quietly, but he never bragged, never argued, never showed his strength. He was just silent. In the training halls, the alien crew sparred loudly. Boasting after every match, the human stood aside, watching when asked to join. He only shook his head. Some laughed at him, calling him a coward. Others ignored him, sure he would be the first to die in real battle. One evening, the captain walked into the training room and found the human sitting alone, sharpening a simple blade. It was not one of their advanced plasma weapons, just a piece of steel worn and plain. The captain frowned. "You do not talk much, human," he said. The man looked up, his eyes calm. "I don't say much, Captain," he answered, voice quiet but steady. "But I can fight." The captain was surprised. There was no pride in his tone, no arrogance, only certainty. It was not a boast. It was a promise. The next day, alarms rang across the ship. A pirate band had found them, small but dangerous, hungry for loot and blood. The crew rushed to battle stations, shouting orders, pulling weapons. Preparing for the fight, the human moved with them. Silent as always, some laughed bitterly. What will he do? Stand and watch? He will hide when the real fight begins. But the captain remembered his words, and his heart stirred with a strange hope. When the pirates' ships latched onto the hull, the corridors shook with the sound of battle. Aliens roared and screamed, firing plasma bolts, slashing with claws, struggling to hold the line. Then in the chaos, the human stepped forward. He carried only his steel blade, nothing more. The alien crew expected him to fall instantly, but instead they saw something that froze them in shock. The silent man moved fast, faster than their eyes could follow. He struck with precision, his blade cutting through armor, his fists slamming enemies against the walls. There was no fear in him, no hesitation, only focus. He fought like a storm, quiet, unstoppable, deadly. One pirate after another fell, their bodies hitting the floor. The human did not stop, did not falter. His breathing was steady, his eyes cold, and when the corridor grew silent again, the alien crew stood frozen, staring at him. This fragile-looking human, the one they had mocked, the one who never spoke, had done what none of them expected. He had fought and he had won. The captain stepped closer, eyes wide with awe. Perhaps the whispers had been wrong. Perhaps this human was not weak at all. Perhaps he was something else, something the galaxy did not yet understand. The silent man only wiped his blade clean, sheathed it, and returned to his corner. He did not ask for praise, he did not smile, but the crew's eyes followed him now, filled with questions and quiet respect. In the captain's heart, one thought echoed. This human says little, but when he fights, that is enough. The alien crew could not forget what they had seen. The silent human, who they once mocked, had fought like no one they had ever known. He had spilled the blood of pirates with nothing more than a steel blade, while they, armed with plasma and claws, had struggled to survive, yet the human had spoken no words. Given no explanation, after the battle he simply returned to his quiet seat in the corner, sharpening his blade again as if nothing had happened. But the whispers across the ship grew louder. He moves like a predator, one insect pilot whispered, her wings trembling. He fought like 10 soldiers, hissed a scaled warrior, his golden eyes wide. He is dangerous. But whose side is he really on? Another muttered, unsure if they should fear him or follow him. The captain said nothing, though his mind wrestled with the same thought. Why would Earth send such a soldier to serve here? Was it a test or a warning to the galaxy? The captain had seen warriors from many worlds, yet none had carried that cold fire in their eyes. Humans were supposed to be young, fragile, a species not yet hardened by centuries of galactic war, and yet this one fought like someone who had survived 100 battles. Days passed, and the human returned to his quiet routine. He spoke little, ate alone, trained alone, but when he walked down the corridors, other soldiers stepped aside. Not out of respect, but out of something deeper. Something close to fear. The captain tried to learn more. He watched the human closely, testing him with small questions. "Do you feel fear?" the captain asked one night while the stars drifted by beyond the glass. The human looked at him, his expression calm. "Fear comes," he said softly, "but I keep moving." The captain waited for more, but the human returned to silence, as if he had already said too much. Soon, the next test arrived. The pirates who had fled the first battle returned. This time with larger ships, they were hungry for revenge. The alarm screamed through the ship once again, and the crew rushed to their stations. But this time, every eye turned to the human. Would he fight again? Would he save them once more? The captain did not ask him. He already knew the answer. The human simply tightened the straps of his armor, picked up his blade, and walked calmly toward the front lines. The pirates swarmed into the ship more than before, stronger and angrier. The alien crew fired plasma bolts, roared their battle cries, and tried to hold the line. But the enemy pushed hard, forcing them back step by step. Just when panic began to spread, the silent man stepped into the corridor. He did not roar like the others. He did not curse or scream, he simply fought. One pirate lunged at him with a burning axe. But the human sidestepped, striking fast. Another fired at him. But he rolled low, his blade flashing. His movements were not wild, but precise, calm, almost too calm. The crew realized they were watching not just a fighter, but a killer trained by endless war. The pirates shouted in rage, focusing their attacks on him. But for every strike they threw, he answered with two. Blood splashed against the walls, bodies fell one after another. The crew's fear began to shift into awe. They were watching something they could not explain, something that defied everything they thought about humans. At last, the corridor grew silent, filled only with the sound of heavy breathing. The human stood among the fallen, his blade dripping, his eyes steady. He looked back at the crew, not smiling, not proud, only calm, and without a word he began cleaning his weapon, wiping it carefully as if the fight had been nothing more than work to be finished. The captain stepped forward, staring at him. "You fight without hesitation," he said, his voice low. The human gave a small nod. "That is what fighting means," he replied. Again, no arrogance, no pride, only certainty. The crew exchanged uneasy looks. They had once mocked him as weak, but now they whispered another word when he passed. "Warrior," and some in quiet voices even said, "Monster," that night. The captain sat alone in his quarters, thinking of what he had seen. Humans, he realized, were something different, something unpredictable. They were not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most advanced, but they carried something no other species had. The will to fight until the last breath, and this silent human was proof. The captain remembered the words spoken in the training hall. "I don't say much, Captain, but I can fight." Now, after seeing him fight twice, the captain understood. It was not a boast, not a promise. It was a warning and perhaps a reminder of what humans truly were. As the ship drifted once more into the cold dark of space, the crew lay restless. Some feared the pirates would return. Some feared the silent man himself. But the captain knew the truth. The galaxy had not yet understood what it meant to fight alongside a human, and soon they would. The pirate raids had ended, but the crew of the warship could not rest easy. They had fought bravely, but they all knew the galaxy held enemies far greater than raiders. The whispers of a larger shadow moved across space, the kind of shadow that swallowed whole fleets, the shadow of an empire. The captain stood in the command deck, staring at the star charts glowing on the table. The lines of red marked where the enemy empire had already spread. Worlds conquered, species enslaved, ships torn apart and rebuilt under their control. The captain's scaled hands tightened on the edge of the table. They were moving closer, and soon they would reach this sector. The crew spoke of them only in hushed voices. "They burn cities until nothing remains," said one. "They break armies as if they were nothing," muttered another. "They laugh at treaties, at laws, at mercy," whispered a third, his eyes wide with fear. Even the bravest among them felt their throats tighten when the empire's name was spoken. For they were not just soldiers, they were conquerors who fought for nothing but domination, and no one had ever truly stopped them. The human, as always, said nothing. He sat in the corner of the mess hall eating quietly, his eyes distant. But the captain noticed something. When the crew whispered of the empire, The human's eyes hardened. His jaw clenched. His grip on the steel blade at his side grew tighter. It was as if he knew them, as if he had fought them before. The captain waited until the mess hall was empty, then sat across from him. "You know something," the captain said, his voice low. The human looked at him silent for a long moment. At last he said, "I have seen them." The captain leaned closer. "You survived?" The human nodded once slowly. "I survived," he said, his voice calm but heavy with memory. The captain wanted to ask more, but the look in the human's eyes stopped him. Those eyes carried the weight of fire, loss, and battles that no words could describe. The crew grew restless as days passed. They trained harder, but fear crept into their bones. If the Empire found them, they knew they would be outnumbered, outgunned, outmatched. Their only comfort was the silent man among them. But even he could not fight an empire alone, could he? One night, the warship drifted near a broken colony world. Its surface burned and scarred. Cities turned to ash. The crew watched from the windows. Silent, no life remained, no voices, no hope, only ruins. The captain's scaled fists clenched. "This is what they leave behind," he said bitterly. The human stood at the glass, his reflection pale for the first time. The crew saw something in his face that was not calm. It was pain. He turned and walked away without a word, his blade hanging at his side. The captain followed him down the corridor. "Human," he said firmly. "Tell me what you know." The man stopped. His back rigid. After a long silence, he spoke. "They will come," he said. "They always come. And they never stop." His voice was low, steady, but the words were heavy like chains. The captain felt the weight of them sink into his chest. "What do they want?" he asked. The human turned, his eyes cold. "Everything," that night. The crew gathered in the common hall, uneasy and fearful. They looked to the captain for reassurance, but it was the human who stepped forward. Surprising them all, he stood tall, his voice calm but strong. "They are coming," he said simply. "You must be ready." The crew shifted nervously, unsure how to respond. "What can we do against them?" one alien asked, his voice trembling. The human's answer was short. "Fight." The room fell into silence. Some shook their heads. "Fight? Against them? That is madness," one said. "They will crush us," another muttered. But the captain watched as the human's calm eyes swept over the room. He saw no fear in them, only certainty. And for the first time, the captain believed. Perhaps this human truly could stand against shadows. The warship left the broken colony behind, but the image of ruins stayed in their minds. Every corridor felt colder, every shadow heavier. The crew began to train harder, sharper, faster, not because they believed they could win, but because the human's quiet certainty pushed them. They did not understand it, but they could not ignore it. The captain called him to his chamber once more. "Human," he said softly, "why do you fight them? What drives you?" The silent man stood still for a long time before answering. At last he said, "Because someone has to." Then he turned and walked away, leaving the captain staring into the dark. The Empire's shadow loomed closer with every passing day. The crew felt it, the captain felt it, and the human, though he said little, carried it like a weight only he could bear. But he sharpened his blade each night, the steel whispering softly in the silence as if he were waiting for the moment the shadow would finally arrive. The warship drifted quietly through the dark lanes of space, but peace did not live inside its halls. The crew trained harder now. Every eye sharper, every hand restless, they knew the Empire's shadow was coming closer. And though they feared, they could not forget the human's words. "Fight," he had said, simple and steady, as if there was no other choice. The captain watched him carefully. The man was still the same, silent, calm, sharpening his blade night after night. But the captain noticed something new. There was weight in the way he moved. Not the weight of fear, but the weight of memory. It was as if he carried ghosts on his shoulders, and every strike of his blade was a reminder of them. The crew whispered about him more now. "Where did he learn to fight like that?" asked one insect pilot. "He fights like he has done it all his life," hissed a scaled warrior. "Or like he has nothing left to lose," another muttered. Shivering, one evening, the captain called him into his quarters. The stars outside burned like distant candles, but inside the air was heavy. "Human," the captain said slowly. "I need to know, who are you really?" The man said nothing at first, his eyes steady, his jaw tight. The captain leaned forward, his voice low. "You have fought enemies stronger than us. Enemies stronger than pirates. You have fought the Empire itself, haven't you? The silence stretched. Then the human finally spoke. Yes, he said simply. The captain froze, his scales prickling. You survived them, he whispered, almost not believing. The human's gaze dropped, his voice calm but heavy. I survived. But not all of us did. The captain waited, saying nothing, letting the silence open the human's memories. At last the man began to speak, his voice quiet like a distant storm. They came to one of our colonies, he said. They came fast with fire and chains. They thought we would kneel. But we fought. His hands tightened into fists, his blade lying across his lap. They broke our defenses, burned our cities. But we kept fighting, street by street. House by house, his voice grew harder. We were not the strongest. We were not the fastest, but we did not stop. No matter how many of us fell, we fought on. The captain could almost see it. Humans fighting with bare hands when weapons ran dry, refusing to surrender even as their homes turned to ash. And this man among them, standing in the fire, watching everything he loved fall. Yet still fighting, the human's eyes darkened. They killed many, too many, he whispered. But some of us survived. His voice cracked, but he did not look away. I fight because I carry their faces in my mind. Every time I close my eyes, I see them. And I cannot let it happen again. The captain felt his throat tighten. This was not just a soldier. This was a man forged by tragedy. He did not fight for glory. He did not fight for medals. He fought because he had lost everything, and he refused to let others face the same end. When the human left the captain's quarters, the alien leader sat alone. He had seen countless warriors in his lifetime, but none like this. This was the truth of humans, he realized. They were not powerful because of strength or weapons. They were powerful because they refused to give up. Even when broken, they carried pain like fuel and turned it into fire. The next day, training in the warship felt different. The human finally stepped into the sparring hall, surprising the crew. They gathered quickly, whispering, watching. He faced one scaled warrior, larger and faster, armed with a plasma spear. The crew expected the human to struggle, but instead he moved with cold precision. He disarmed the warrior in seconds, pinning him to the ground, calm and steady. He helped him back up without a word, and turned to face the next challenger. One by one they stepped forward, insect-scaled, gray, all testing him, and one by one they fell, not because he was stronger, not because he was faster, but because he refused to lose. His movements were efficient, controlled, the movements of someone who had fought too many times to waste energy. By the end, the hall was silent. Every eye locked on him. He stood breathing slowly, his blade still sheathed at his side. He had beaten them all without drawing it. The captain stepped into the circle, voice loud and clear. This is what it means to fight like a human, he said. And this is why we will not kneel when the Empire comes. The crew's eyes burned with new fire. They had feared the Empire, but now they felt something else, hope. Because if one human could survive them, if one human could carry so much pain and still fight, then maybe they too could stand. That night, the human sat alone again, sharpening his blade, but this time when he looked up, he saw eyes watching him from the shadows of the corridor. Not with mockery, not with fear, but with respect. For the first time he was not alone. The crew now carried his secret too, and together they waited for the shadow to fall. The warship drifted through a dark nebula, its sensors struggling to read the clouds of gas and shadow. The crew was tense, every sound sharp in their ears. Every light on the panels watched with fear. They knew the Empire was near, too near, and the human silence weighed heavier than any alarm. The captain stood at the command deck, his scaled fingers tightening on the rail. Keep shields ready, he ordered, his voice low. But before the crew could respond, the ship shuddered. Red lights flashed across the panels. Alarms screamed from the shadows of the nebula. Massive shapes emerged, Empire ships, sleek and black, with glowing red marks like scars across their hulls. They slid out of the mist like predators, surrounding the warship in a deadly circle. The crew froze, staring at the screen. There are too many, one whispered. Dozens of them. Another gasped. We cannot fight this. The captain's throat tightened. He knew it was true. This was no raid, no small attack. This was an ambush. The Empire had been waiting, watching, and now it had them trapped. The enemy's voice cracked through the comms, cold and mocking. Foreign ships, surrender now. Lower your shields and perhaps we will spare a few of you. The crew looked to their captain. eyes wide with fear. To surrender meant slavery. Chains, humiliation, but to resist meant death. For a moment, the warship was silent. Only the hum of the engines and the shaking breath of the crew. Then the human stood, stepping forward from the shadows. He did not raise his voice, he did not shout. But every ear heard him clearly. "No," he said, calm and steady. "We fight." The crew turned, staring. Some gasped. Some shook their heads. Fight? Against the Empire? It was madness, but the captain's eyes locked on the human. And in that moment he felt a strange fire in his chest. The same fire he had seen when the human first picked up his blade. The fire of someone who did not accept defeat. The captain straightened, his voice loud. "Raise shields. Prepare weapons," he ordered. The crew moved, their fear breaking under the sharpness of command. If the human could say no, then so could they. But as the first blast struck their shields, the human stepped closer to the captain. "They will not stop firing," he said, voice calm. "They will break us piece by piece until we cannot fight back." The captain's jaw tightened. "Then what do you suggest?" The human's eyes narrowed. "I will board their flagship." The words hit the crew like a strike of thunder. "Alone?" One shouted, "That is suicide," and another gasped. But the human only nodded, calm as always. "Yes," he said. "Alone." The captain stared at him, scales prickling with disbelief. "You cannot face them all," he said. But the human only gave that quiet, steady smile. "I don't say much, Captain," he said softly, "but I can fight." The captain's chest tightened. He wanted to refuse, to order the human back. But deep down he knew the truth. Only this man could do it. Only he had the will to stand against the Empire's fire. The plan was madness, yet it was the only hope. The human would take a small boarding pod, slip through the chaos, and land on the enemy's command ship. If he could destroy their control center, the fleet would lose coordination. The warship might have a chance to escape. The crew worked quickly, preparing the pod. They whispered to each other, some in awe, some in fear. "He will not return," one muttered. "No one could," another said. But when the human walked past them, blade at his side, armor strapped tight, they fell silent. For there was something in his eyes they could not look away from. Not anger, not pride, but certainty. The captain met him at the pod. He placed a clawed hand on the human's shoulder, his voice low. "If you fall, we will remember you," he said. The human shook his head. "Do not remember me," he said. "Remember to fight." The pod doors sealed, the engines roared. The crew watched the small vessel launch into the darkness. Slipping between blasts of fire, the Empire's fleet opened fire, trying to strike him down, but the pod twisted and spun, cutting through space like a dart. The captain held his breath, watching the tiny light vanish into the shadow of the enemy flagship. The warship shook under heavy fire. Shields failing, weapons overheating, the crew fought desperately. But their eyes kept flicking to the screen. Waiting, hoping, praying. The captain whispered under his breath. "Silent human, if you truly can fight, do it now." Deep in the shadow of the nebula, the pod clamped onto the hull of the Empire's flagship. The doors hissed open and the human stepped out, blade in hand, ahead of him. Endless corridors stretched into darkness, filled with enemies waiting to kill him. He tightened his grip, his breath steady, alone. Against an Empire he smiled once, a small, quiet smile, and then he moved. The pod clamped against the Empire's flagship with a heavy thud. Inside the cramped chamber, the human stood calm, breathing slow, his blade resting across his knees. When the doors hissed open, he stepped into the darkness of the enemy's great warship. The air smelled of metal and smoke, the corridors lit with blood-red glow. He was alone, but his steps did not falter. The first soldiers arrived within moments. Armored giants with weapons raised, they sneered when they saw him. One fragile human standing against the Empire. "Easy kill," one hissed. But the words died with him. The human moved, faster than their eyes could follow, his blade slicing clean. Two more fell before they even fired a shot, their bodies collapsing with heavy thuds. The alarms blared, echoing through the flagship. The Empire knew he was here now, and they would send wave after wave. But the human did not stop. He fought through the corridor, each strike calm, each step steady. He did not waste energy, he did not roar or curse. He fought like water cutting through stone, unstoppable and cold. On the warship far behind, the crew watched through flickering screens. Sensors tracked the human's heat signature moving deeper and deeper into the enemy vessel. They stared in disbelief. "He cannot survive this," whispered one insect pilot, her wings trembling. But the captain shook his head, eyes burning with something like pride. "He is human," he said. "And that is enough." Back on the flagship, more enemies closed in. Dozens filled the corridor, armored, armed, towering. They opened fire, plasma bolts scorching the walls. The human rolled low, moving like a shadow. He closed the distance before they could reload. Blade flashing, fists striking. One soldier screamed as he fell. Another dropped his weapon, eyes wide with terror. This was no fragile creature. This was a storm in human skin, step by step. He pushed deeper into the flagship. He reached the engine halls, massive chambers glowing with red energy. The air was hot, heavy, filled with smoke. More enemies poured in, their commander shouting orders. But the human did not hesitate. He climbed steel beams, swung from chains struck from above. He turned their numbers against them. Using their size, their anger, their arrogance, bodies fell into the burning cores. The hall filled with screams, and still he fought. His armor was scorched. Blood ran down his side, but his eyes stayed steady. Every cut, every bruise he ignored. He had carried worse before, he had survived worse before. Pain was nothing compared to the faces in his memory, and he would not fail them now on the warship. The crew leaned close to their screens. They could not hear his voice, but they felt his fight through every signal. Every movement. They had once mocked him, feared him, but now their hearts beat with him. He was not just one man anymore, he was hope at last. The human reached the command decks. The doors opened to reveal rows of elite guards, taller, faster, armored in black steel. And at the end, the Empire's commander stood waiting. A towering figure, eyes burning like fire. "You are nothing," the commander growled. "One man cannot face an empire." The human's lips curved into a quiet smile. "I don't need to face an empire," he said calmly. "I just need to face you." The guards roared and charged. The human met them head on. Blade flashing, body moving like lightning. He used every ounce of strength, every drop of will. The corridor became chaos. Shouts, screams, sparks, fire. But the human pressed forward step by step, until the guards fell silent around him. Now only the commander remained. The alien towered over him, armor glowing, weapon raised. "You will die here," the commander said. The human wiped blood from his face, eyes steady. "Maybe," he whispered, "but not before I finish this." The captain and crew, watching from afar, held their breath. They could not see every detail, but they saw the human step forward, blade ready, and they knew this was the moment. One man against the Empire's heart, one man carrying the weight of worlds. The battle shook the command deck, sparks flying, walls splitting. The commander struck with monstrous force. But the human dodged, countered, cut deep. Each strike of his blade was not just steel. It was survival. It was vengeance. It was memory. He thought of the colonies burned, the faces lost, the voices silenced, and he struck harder, faster, until even the Empire's commander stumbled. At last, with one final cry, the human drove his blade deep. The commander fell, crashing to the floor, his weapon clattering away. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the human's ragged breathing. He stood over the fallen enemy, bloodied, battered, but unbroken on the warship. The crew erupted in cries. They had seen it. They had felt it, one human, against an Empire's commander, and he had not fallen. The captain's eyes burned as he whispered, "That is enough." The human, standing in the enemy's heart, did not smile. He simply pulled his blade free, lifted his comm, and spoke the only words the crew needed to hear. "Fight!" And with that, the warship rallied, blasting through the Empire's fleet with new fire, because now they knew the truth. If one human could stand alone against an empire, then together they could survive. The command deck of the Empire's flagship lay in ruins. Sparks rained from broken panels, smoke curled through the shattered walls. The human stood among the wreckage, his blade dripping with blood, his armor cracked and scorched. The enemy commander lay silent at his feet, defeated, but the human's chest heaved, each breath heavy, each step unsteady. He had fought through an army, fought through fire, and though he still stood, his body was breaking far away aboard the warship. The crew held their breath. They had seen it through the sensors, seen the commander fall, seen their silent ally survive where no one should have. For a moment they were frozen, unable to believe what had happened. Then cheers erupted, raw and desperate. "He did it," one cried. "He killed their commander," shouted another. The captain, though, did not cheer. He stood silent, watching the faint signal of the human still moving inside the flagship. The battle outside raged on without their commander. The Empire's fleet faltered, their attacks less precise, their formation breaking. The warship struck hard, blasting through the gaps, tearing ships apart for the first time. The crew felt the impossible. Victory was within reach, but they knew this victory had been bought by one man alone in the enemy's heart. Inside the flagship, the human staggered. His legs felt heavy, his arms weak, but his will burned brighter than the flames around him. He moved deeper into the control center, planting charges on the power cores. If the flagship fell, the fleet would scatter. But each step was harder than the last. Blood dripped from his side. His vision blurred, still he did not stop. Because stopping meant failure, and failure was something he had never allowed. At last he reached the core chamber, a massive glowing heart of red energy. He set the charges, hands steady despite the pain. The timer began to tick. He had minutes to escape. But as he turned, more soldiers appeared, drawn by the sound of destruction. Dozens of them, weapons ready, eyes filled with fury. The human gripped his blade tighter, his body trembling. He knew he could not outrun them, so he did not try on the warship. The captain's calm crackled to life. It was the human's voice, low, rough, but steady. "Captain," he said. The bridge fell silent, every ear straining. "I've set the charges," the human continued. "This ship will fall." The captain's scaled hand tightened on the console. "You must get out," he said quickly. "Return to us. We will cover you." But the human only gave a quiet laugh, tired but calm. "There is no time," he said. "They are already here." The crew froze, their throats tight. They knew what he meant. He was not coming back. The captain's voice broke. "Human, you have done enough," he said, his voice shaking. But the man's reply was steady. "No," he whispered. "Not yet." The sounds of battle echoed faintly through the comm. Metal clashing, shouts, plasma fire. The crew could almost see it. The silent man fighting one last time, holding back the Empire so his charges could finish the job. Tears filled the eyes of hardened warriors, their claws trembling, their wings shaking. They had never cried for one of their own, but now they cried for him. Minutes passed like hours, then suddenly, a deep rumble shook the void through the viewports. They saw it, the flagship exploding in a blinding storm of fire and light. The Empire's fleet scattered, ships breaking, fleeing, or falling silent. The warship shook under the blast wave, but it held. And when the light faded, silence fell across the stars. The crew sat in stunned silence, their breaths uneven, their hearts heavy. They had won, but the price was carved deep into them. The captain lowered his head, his voice rough. "He said he could fight," he whispered, "and he did." The crew bowed their heads, not in fear this time, not in doubt, but in respect. Respect for the silent human who had given everything. In the days that followed, the story spread, not just among the crew, but to every allied world, a story of one human who boarded an Empire's flagship alone, who fought an army, who brought down a commander. They told of his silence, of his smile, of the words he gave before his final battle. "I don't say much, Captain, but I can fight." And the captain's answer, spoken now across the stars, "That's enough." In taverns, in training halls, in the quiet corners of spaceports, the tale was repeated. The aliens who once mocked humans now whispered their names with respect. They began to understand what humans truly were. Not the strongest, not the fastest, but the ones who refused to fall. And though the man was gone, his story lived. It lived in the hearts of those who fought. It lived in the fire of those who resisted the Empire. And it lived in the quiet strength of every human who came after. The captain often stood alone at the viewport. Staring at the stars, he remembered the man's calm eyes, his steady voice, his final fight. And though the galaxy called him hero, warrior, savior, the captain remembered him as he truly was, a man who did not speak much. But when the time came, he fought, and that, in the end, was enough.